As an adult, start to look at fairy tales in a different light. I mean, you kind of need a little bit more background information before you decide if the protagonist is actually the protagonist and if the Wicked Witch is actually the Wicked Witch. Serial killer documentaries have become such a fascination these days that true crime and love stories somehow become intertwined into twisted fairy tales that end in codependency or suicide. They say there is more serial killers than we know of, but the smart ones never get caught. They also say that men are more aggressive and violent than women. There has also been discussion that most serial killer women are just better at not getting caught. Society has been fed this idea that women are innocent and helpless creatures. But I say women, some of them are some of the most dangerous people that you should watch out for. Culturally, we look at women as people we need to protect, innocent, sweet little blondes that people want to harm, protect them at all costs. Years of fairy tales telling us that they need rescuing. If you look at many psychopath criminals over history, many of them were in fact beautiful blonde women. Their looks alone could kill. When I read over these gruesome fairy tales, and my adult experience and knowledge has made me question the motives in the story. As an adult, when you learn the background information, the more questions you have. It seems the prettier the protagonist, the more troublesome the protagonist is, just like in real life. The blonde, beautiful princess is always so perfect and does nothing wrong. The darker-haired princesses just made the most of their situations. Belle, Pocahontas, Jasmine, like, yeah, I'm captured and secluded by this beast, but hey, I'll just take the time to educate myself. Since, you know, society says women should be pretty, Belle was like, yeah, I'll accept this outcome. It could be worse. Jasmine was like, yeah, I fell in love with this poor guy, but, you know, whatever. As long as we can fool my dad, who cares? Pocahontas, I mean, there's a very different real-life version compared to the story. So Hansel and Gretel, this is the first example here. They were sweet little kids in Europe, always pictured somewhere around Germany as cute little blonde or gingery blonde kids. The stepmom was the Wicked Witch that didn't want them, convinced the dad to get rid of them. It turns out that the old witch was the stepmother in disguise. When I asked questions and decided to do some research, I came across some really interesting things. So apparently, a long time ago, prior to incubators, midwives used to place babies in warm bread dough. It would keep them warm and keep their skin from drying out, and they would place them in a slightly warmed oven. So no, they were not evil witches eating babies. However, the Hansel and Gretel story written was around 1300, 1400, whatever you call it, BC, 80, I don't even know. But there was a famine, and it was a really bad famine, and people were sometimes resorting to cannibalism. People were apparently searching for food. There's rumors that people would be going to their neighbors' houses and stealing children to eat them. So when the wicked stepmother was sending the kids into the forest, they were probably protecting them, you know, hoping that they would go forage, maybe find some food since there wasn't any. The kids were dropping breadcrumbs and jelly beans. So first of all, they were in a famine. Who wastes food when you're starving to death and people are eating their neighbors? And then, just gotta scroll down here. The next thing you know, they find this house in the woods, and the woman agrees to feed them. In return, they toss her into the fire. There's no mention of the children crying or having PTSD. You know, the fairy tale is always like, it was a victory, and the kids are like rejoicing, jumping up and down. They got like a lollipop in one hand. They defeated the old Wicked Witch, and then they run home safely. But wait a second. They were so lost that they had to toss food on the ground. They were throwing jelly beans, and they're like running home. But I thought they were so lost. So the whole time they weren't lost, they're like, oh, help me, old lady. I'm lost and I'm hungry and I can't find my way home. And then like the lady's nice enough to let them inside, and then they toss her in the oven, and then they go running home. And there's no mention of like crying or PTSD. So the other thing that made me think was like, maybe these kids were like luring people into the woods, like, you know, just leaving some breadcrumbs, hoping somebody would follow them. Gretel, this cute little blonde, you know, she was the victim in one version of the story, but she probably had RAD or some kind of like psychopath or detachment disorder. You know, had no problem killing the old lady, then skipping home merrily. Like, hello, father, how are you? And dad's like, oh, I'm good, how are you? How was your day? And she's like, oh, it's good, I just wandered through the forest, you killed an old lady and had a cookie. Nothing exciting. Could you imagine? I don't know. These blondes, they're trouble though. Like every story out there that you look, any kind of old fairy tale, and it's talking about these cute little blonde girls, they were all trouble. Cinderella, she was never doing her chores. She's bringing mice and animals into the house, sneaking out to parties, talking to boys, calling her stepsisters ugly, lying about her identity. She was like a teenage girl sneaking out with a fake ID going to the bar. Sleeping Beauty, she was like snooping in the attic. She was touching things she was told not to, and in one version of the story, she had an affair with a rich old dude. Odette, she was like hunting animals for fun, and the real version of the story was that she had like a suicide pact and was like, come on, honey, come into the water. Snow White, the older depictions, they show her as like, you know, a blonde, fair-skinned girl. She was like, you know, talk about dramatic. I mean, she faked her own death and went to go live at a frat house. And then The Little Mermaid, there was like an older version where she was like this woman that had too much grandma juice and was dancing on the beach and passed out, and she, you know, started dancing for the first dude she met. And she had this sister who was the blonde one, said, here's a dagger, you have to get rid of the prince. And she didn't want to, but it was the blonde that gave her the dagger in the story, just saying. Princess and the Pea, no drama there. Frog Prince, I mean, she basically married her sugar daddy. She was also a little bit abusive. There was stories about her tossing the frog against the wall. Alice in Wonderland, okay, well, I don't really need to convince you much with that one. Alice in Wonderland, she was sneaking out, doing drugs, going into other dimensions and killing the queen in the other dimension. I mean, she pretty much just conquered the other dimension with the help of a Cheshire cat. And then there's that other one, I forget what it was called, but it was like one with a little blonde girl and a cauldron. And her friend gets killed because of this cauldron, and her friends go and like steal this sword, and they have this magical cauldron that's basically like Pandora's box for like doomsday. And there's like these people that are after them and want this evil cauldron. Okay, but first of all, why does the little blonde girl have the doomsday Pandora box or cauldron, and why did she unleash it? You know, oh, it was an accident. Oh, my friend died. And then, like, she's not even, like, is she even sad that her friend, like, fell into the cauldron to save them? I don't know. Just saying. These blondes, you can't trust them. If you're going to watch out for anyone, I wouldn't say it's the men in the alleyway. I would say it's the blonde girl that you would never suspect anything from. I think those are the ones that you should be cautious of. Tinkerbell, that was also pretty obvious. She would have tossed Wendy to the mermaids the first chance she got. So, just something to think about when you read these little fairy tale stories or watch the movies. When you start to question things, you know, you start to look at things in a different light. And then you go down that rabbit hole and it's like, you can never go back. Also, in the Cinderella story, She was talking to a tree on her mom's grave, and she got these shoes made out of gold. That's in one of the other stories. How's a poor girl get her hands on gold shoes?